Well, it's 3. We begin with our today's webinar. Good evening, a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Change management is the key to successful digital transformations. Organizations of all types and size are heavily investing on digitization. Digital transformation stimulates the companies to choose the right technology as well as find out what no longer works and what should be replaced or updated. Let's hear it from our today's speaker, who is a digital HR transformation leader, and I have read some of his works on future of work and digital change. HR HR Association of India welcomes you all to the 2020 Dialogue Masterclass series on the topic Digital Change Management. To know more about HRAI and its event, I would request all our participants to visit the link and details posted in the chat window. I request all our participants to kindly follow the webinar guidelines mentioned in the chat window. It would be great to have all the participants' feedback. We will be running a poll before the Q&A session and request all participants to kindly give your feedback on the session. I now take the privilege to introduce our esteemed speaker for today, Mr. Shakun Khanna, HR leader, digital HR transformation advisor. He is a highly sought after HR transformation expert in Asia and serves as the head of HCM application strategy, JAPAC, at Oracle Corporation. Prior to his joining Oracle, Shakun was the country head of Right Management India. In his earlier roles, Shakun has been the head of IBM Smarter Workforce and leader of employee engagement and leadership development practice for Gallup Consulting. He also co-founded Consentious Advisory, a specialty transformation consulting firm. Over the last 2 decades, he has been a consultant to many Fortune 500 organizations on area of digital HR transformation, talent management, organization design and development, employee experience, leadership development, and succession planning. Shakun carries rich experience of managing business for global organization in various leadership roles. An accredited executive coach, Shakun is also a master facilitator of the consciousness-based leadership with the International Center of Contemporary Consciousness, an inquisitive traveler and an avid reader. Shakun is greatly inspired by Dr. Stephen Covey and Donald Clifton, which instills in him a great passion to transform organizations for betterment of their human capital. You can also follow him on LinkedIn and his Twitter handle. The link for the same has been shared in the chat window. Without taking much time, I now welcome Mr. Shakun Khanna to take over the session. Over to you, Mr. Shakun.
Thank you so much, Peterson, and thank you for inviting me here today, and thanks for all the participants. Now, the topic for today is very interesting: digital change management. Actually, sometimes we look at it change and digital management, or the other times it could be digital and change management, but we are talking today about digital change management. So I thought I would look at it from multiple perspectives. And Peter, I was going through some of the questions that a few of the participants have already sent. We'll try and address those. But the whole idea is to look at what was happening before what is happening, right? What I mean by that is we were going through a process of change, through a process of transformation as it is. And then suddenly this pandemic situation happened. We got into a situation of lockdown, and then everybody started talking about the Great Reset, and they talked about the new normal unveiling itself. So whether we were already changing or not, now the situation is such that all of us have to change and adopt to the new way of working. So I thought I'll just quickly take a holistic view around multiple things that are happening. In the world of business, if you look at it, change is not new, right? We are, again, there is this term called new normal that everybody is using today. But before new normal became the new fad, we were all talking about Industry 4.0. And I think that's a very important perspective for us to take. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, if you look at it, there has been constant change, so there was the first part of industrial revolution, which was largely revolutionized by hydropower and steam power. That's the first level of mechanization that happened. Next began during the beginning of the 20th century, where we saw electric power taking over, and we had huge amount of mechanization happening in organizations, specifically in manufacturing environments. Then came the onslaught of electronics and the age of information technology, where everything got computerized. And today, we are talking about entering into the phase of a digital first life and a digital first economy. And that's a very important piece. As the level of complexity in our lives, in the way we manage and run organizations, and in the way economic value is being created, the complexity is increasing. And as more and more complexity is increasing, it is the computing power that is taking a front seat. Earlier, it was hydropower, or steam power. It was essentially mechanical power that was ruling, but today it's the computing power that is ruling. And I think when we look at this fourth industrial revolution, it's important that we understand what it is and how it is different. Somebody sent a question saying, what is different and why we have to change perhaps differently this time around? So first of all, we are entering in a connected world. Now, if you look at it, we are all gathered here, and I can see more than 60, 70 people right now representing multiple industries, multiple businesses, multiple organizations and backgrounds, and more importantly, concurrently present here from different cities and different places. That's the epitome of connectivity. We are able to see each other, talk to each other without really worrying about all the travel and everything. It has never ever happened earlier. Not only we feel virtually connected, the devices are all connected and communicative. So when I'm speaking to you, my phone is also communicating with me. My devices are communicating with each other, for example, right? So what is happening is that in the fourth industrial revolution, everything is connected and they are communicating with each other. For those of you who are from manufacturing industry, you will see how machines are connected today, how they can talk to each other. And once they start talking to each other, then this whole aspect of data and analytics start. In fact, if you look at it, machines today are far more intelligent. Uh, Natural language processing, I'm sure all of us use Alexas and Siris of the world. They are so good today. It was not the case many years ago, because now this whole computing power has taken over and devices are talking to each other. That makes the world very, very predictive, right? So today, I mean, of course, these days we don't travel and we don't commute, but before the lockdown, all of us could actually look at the Google map and tell exactly the time when we will arrive, not just by a train or by air, which is kind of pretty scheduled. Even on road, on a real-time basis, we could predict. That prediction today has gone to much more profound levels, right? There are algorithms that can predict, for example, stock performances. There are algorithms that could predict fitment of people into role and their performance. There are technologies that can now predict what would be the impact of change if you are contemplating changing models in your organization. And that obviously has a very profound impact on productivity. So the first thing when we look at managing digital change, these are the four critical pieces that we will have to look at. First of all, everybody is connected. People are communicating, devices are communicating, machines are communicating. There's a much higher degree of predictivity or predictions in the world, and the productivity has really, gone through the roof today. The average productivity of a human being currently is at its peak level ever in the history of human race, and that's irrespective of the field you are in. And this is the context with which we have to understand, and manage change. Now, if you look at it, technology is in the forefront and the center of driving this change. And this has never happened earlier. Most of the times, it has been human aspirations that were in the middle of the change. Today, our aspirations are being shaped by the technology. Because there is a technology, therefore, I want to do this. In the earlier era, they said necessity is the mother of invention. Today, perhaps technology is the mother of invention. And that's a big change that has happened. Now, of course, as Klaus Schwab says, this is a great opportunity for us, but at the same time, this is great peril also. Whether we like it or we don't like it, this technology comes at a much higher risk of side effects. You know, my son, for example, he's been uh, on Zoom classes all the time. And while we were thinking that he's kind of really studying hard, he found out a way to, you know, open a YouTube video on a different window and just, enjoy his time when the class is going on. Now that's interesting because all of us did some naughty things in our classes as well. But here technology is adding to that peril as well. So what would it mean? Going forward, first of all, machines will become much more intelligent and they will be able to make decisions themselves. So we are today talking about, say, for example, self-driving cars that can take a decision when to stop and when to move. And this adds a whole lot of new dimensions to decision making. The latest version of self-driving cars can actually detect if the driver is sleepy, for example, under the influence of alcohol, and take certain decisions on their behalf. We have smart gadgets like smart refrigerators that can actually order refill of milk the moment it realizes that it's gone down a particular level that you want to be maintained there. So artificial intelligence is going to take over. Now, before we went into this crisis situation, there was a big argument whether artificial intelligence will take over jobs or it will create more jobs. What will happen? The fact is, artificial intelligence is here. It is here to stay, and we will have to change and adopt to a new way of working. Artificial intelligence will take away so many jobs. But more jobs have been lost because of this COVID crisis that nobody prepared for. And in fact, now artificial intelligence is being used to create more jobs. So it's a very interesting and a new way of looking at things. What will be interesting is that while on one side, human productivity is significantly increasing, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, all put together will significantly reduce the effort that human beings have to put in. And that's an interesting paradigm around productivity. There was, I don't know where it came from, but somewhere it came from that an average person should work about 8 to 10 hours in a day to be able to achieve the results that he or she is expected to do. Now, that paradigm is based on a lot of inefficiencies built into it. Now, if I can do same amount of work using technology, using artificial intelligence in a much lesser time, why not then I have a 4-hour work day or a 4-day work week, right? So that I can enjoy more time doing things that I like and less time doing professional things that probably give me my livelihood. From an HR perspective, I think it's a very interesting and an important change management paradigm, that if productivity is increasing, what do you do with the extra time at hand? So therefore, quality of life can significantly improve. Anything and everything that is not data driven today will not have any relevance. There was a time we used to go to a shop, feel a product, and if we liked it, we'll pick it up. Today, that doesn't happen. We look at a shopping app, then we look at the data, which essentially is the reviews that other fellow buyers have given, and then take a decision. So it's completely changed, right? How many times did I ask a shopkeeper to tell me how many people have, rated this shirt so and so? but now I do it all the time, and every one of us does. So that is changing, and therefore we have to look at how we incorporate all this in the way we manage change. Because see, when it comes to change management, the process of managing change remains the same. The levers in digital change management become very, very different, right? The last thing that is going to happen from a implication of technology perspective is life will become unknowingly predictable. Now, what is unknowingly predictable? A lot of things you do it yourself. So for example, when you check on Google Maps that how long will it take for me to reach there, you are knowingly doing that. But when on the way Google tells you that, hey, here is a street shop which serves the best dish that you like, or here is a shoe that you were trying to search for yesterday, that is unknowingly predictable, because a lot of systems out there are tracking a lot of data about us, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, and that has a strong bearing on our decisions. We've all heard the much big controversy around how election results could be influenced using data, how technology is playing a role in changing behavior of people. And I think as change management professionals, that is something that we will need to look at. Now, this was something that was happening as it is when Industry 4.0 was unrevealing itself. And then suddenly, about 6 months ago, we got into this pandemic state. And here, what has happened is people have changed themselves. So the external environment was changing, and suddenly there was a big shift that happened, and people changed themselves. Some of you may have heard me about talking about this whole rise of Generation R, a new generation that is coming up, and it's kind of changing the way people think and behave. So it's important that as we are driving change in our organization, we should also look at how people have evolved specifically in the last 4 or 5 months or so, and then only define our change strategy. So let me tell you a couple of very interesting things in terms of the impact that this entire experience of the last 6 months has had on people and how it has changed and reshaped their behavior and thinking. First of all, and most of us will be surprised to know this, people have become far more adaptive and far more agile. You know, and it's interesting that during the lockdown, 56% people have said that they have learned something new. And they have learned something new because of, not because of compulsion, but because of their choice. People have learned to cook, people have learned to sing and dance, music, coding. I personally learned a lot of work in the kitchen, for example, right? And all these things people learn on their own. Now, if you look at traditionally, for those of you who come from learning and development specifically, it was very difficult for us to force people to learn. We would have to really get them to learning classes or whatever it was. Now suddenly that paradigm has changed. People are hungry for knowledge and information. They've realized that there is a clear explicit need to upgrade their skills, and therefore they are reaching out to it. Of course, the way they learn is very, very different, but that's an important piece. 75% of the people said that they have adopted new technology during these last 3 4 months or 5 months or perhaps 6 months now. And this technology is not just downloading the Netflix app or buying more on Amazon. No, it's much beyond that. It could be a new kind of a vacuum cleaner. A friend of mine runs a company called a company into robotics, which help, these are cleaning robotics, which can help you clean your house pretty much like a human maid. He has seen a 400% jump in his sales during the last 3 4 months, simply because people are now exploring what are the options beyond human beings. So therefore, machines are now going to compete real time with humans when it comes to delivering work. 66% of the people today are feeling more spiritual than before. Now, I don't know why it is. This is what people are saying. It could be perhaps because humanity has been brought to its knees because we are just not able to do anything about this little tiny virus that came from nowhere and completely halted our lives that we were very proud of, and we thought that we have captured the forces of nature or we control the forces of nature. Maybe people have been contemplating more because they've had a lot of time at hand, or any other reason. But that's an important piece. So therefore, it is kind of getting into the minds of people and it is changing. The And I don't know whether it is a good news or a bad news. The news is that 62% of the people are saying once things go back to normal, they will be willing to put in much more effort. So suddenly you have this workforce that is willing to learn new things, that is willing to put much more effort into their work. They are willing to adopt new technology. A lot of change management challenges or the traditional change management challenges actually get taken care of by this. And all this put together, majority of them, precisely 72% people are saying we are feeling much more resilient. Whenever it has happened that there have been significant job losses in the world, economic downturn like the way we are kind of sensing and feeling now, aggregated resilience of people has gone down. It is perhaps the first time that people are feeling far more resilient. And there is a reason to it because the external environment is changing. There is a much deeper understanding of the fact that competition out there would be much more higher, right? And then they are saying, of course, they will need to work more harder. People want a lot of flexibility. And I think before we get into this whole change management paradigm, we'll have to understand that this time change has to be agile. Change has to be very, very flexible. You cannot change from one process to the other process. Now you will have to change from one standard process to multiple ways of doing things. So one of the clear recommendations that I have when you are managing change, do not create a new state or a change state that is removing one rigidity by another rigidity. As I said, people today want to work much harder, but they want to decide when to work, where to work from, which device they want to use, how much they want to work, right? Not everybody wants to work for, say, 10 hours a day. Not everybody wants to work on from Monday to Friday, So people now have realized that they've got much more choices, and therefore they want much more choices. Earlier, we did not know that work can be delivered so efficiently in a virtual environment. This afternoon, I was joking to my wife, what's the purpose of a school now? Because students can all learn on their own, perhaps have home tutors or personal teachers, and then just appear for exams and get done with it, right? So the whole paradigm of school is changing. Interestingly, my daughter, she's in 12th standard. Now, her biggest complaint is that I'm not able to go to the school and create those memories of the 12th standard. All this while they were thinking that there will be finally the time when we would be the seniors in the school and we would do a whole lot of things which all of us have done in our times. Now that year is missed for them, right? And they are under a severe, I don't know what they will talk about 20 years down the line. What did they do in 12th standard? Nothing, right? So that's changed. Now there's a question that how is older generation facing this change? It's very interesting that from a change management perspective, we believe that older generation is is more rigid, or sometimes they find it difficult to change. On the contrary, this research that I'm showing right now, 54% of the respondents were Generation X people, people who are, my age or above, right? People who could be considered relatively older. They are changing rapidly and very fast. And then there are youngsters who are not changing. So remember, always it has happened from time immemorial. Age has got nothing to do with the change and agility. People who are agile and flexible will survive. People who are not will not survive. I'm sure we all have heard the story of, that flexible tree versus the inflexible tree. The coconut trees back in South, they all go down when the winds are coming because they are flexible, and then they go back and they survive. The rigid trees don't. Same applies to generation or individuals that are not flexible, not are willing to change. So just to give you an example, a colleague of mine said, I'm finding it very difficult to work from home. There's no set time. There's no set place to work. I just can't concentrate. Guess what will happen to that person? Very soon, either he or she will have to adapt to this new way of working or become redundant. Because now you can't just open the office for that gentleman or that lady simply because they are not able to adapt to this new way of working. So older generation will have to face this change. And the good news is a lot of them are doing that. And again, as I said, it's not the first time. When computerization happened, when mass production happened, when steam engines came, all these things happened earlier also. So that's there. So that is changing, right? And then finally, if you look at it, and I'll look at some other questions that are here. One is that, so do you mean AI will explore multiple options for a single job? The answer is yes. For a single job, a company will have a choice today whether to employ a full-time employee, a part-time employee, a gig worker, or even a machine worker, for example. I just gave you the example that today you can decide whether you want a human maid to be coming to your home to do the cleaning, or you want a little bot that can move around and clean. Choice is yours. Now you have choice. For the single job, you've got multiple options. That is one paradigm. On the human side of it, because of this, individuals have a choice of having multiple sources of income and having multiple professions at the same time. A large majority of organizations are now exploring how they can employ more gig workers and how they can create more gig opportunities going forward. And that will again have a bearing on changing how organizations change and how individuals change. So one interesting pattern that is emerging is that going forward, because of all these patterns, the individual contributor roles are gaining more prominence. One of the questions earlier was that how do we decide on our career progression and how do we change ourselves? One of the mindset that you must look at and change, and this is more to do with youngsters who are just starting their career, that people management roles will significantly change. Individual contributor roles will gain more prominence, and there's a reason to it. Earlier, we did a research. It's called the AI at Work study. For those of you who are interested, you can go online and just Google AI at Work research by Oracle, and then you will find a whole lot of stuff. We found out that 68% of the people responded saying that they would prefer a bot over a human manager. I would like to take my instructions from a robot, right, rather than a human being, because machines are not biased. They are not opportunistic people, right? They are very, very fair and to the point. So that is now threatening this whole entire role of people managers. A lot of people out there, 63% to be precise, are actually looking at trying out new roles. And again, I repeat, this 63% comprises both the older generation people as well as the younger generation people, right? They want to try out new roles. So that means that your career will not remain the same throughout your working life. There was a time when a person chose his or her career pretty much during college or at the starting point, and then continued to do that throughout his or her life. That has changed now. It is estimated that an average person who's starting his or her career now will end up changing 7 careers and 20 jobs by the time they retire. And 7 career here means dramatically different career. You could be a photographer and then become a chef and then go and work for a software company, then perhaps become a HR manager. These kind of dramatic shifts will happen. And that's something, again, we all must get ready to, right? So I'll take a pause here because I'm just reading some of the questions on the chat, which I will like answer. And if there are more questions, let them come in. So down the line, if AI is developed and implemented in everything, do you think the interaction communication between humans will reduce? We are already talking to gadgets, and the first thing that we look at each morning is our mobile. How can we change and still balance this? This is a very intelligent question, Radha, and that's exactly what is happening. But if you look at human beings are social animals, as they say, and they find ways of communicating and interacting. There was a time when we communicated through sign language, perhaps the A page I'm talking about. Then sign language came in. Then certain symbols came in. Then came the modern day languages and linguistics around it. So our pattern of communication through the ages has been changing. There was a time not very long ago, even when I was in college or in my school days, for example, we did not even have phones, in all the Indian households. So when we had communication, we used to communicate face to face most of the times or write letters to each other. Then this big sound revolution happened when everybody had a phone and we could talk to each other. And then this mobile revolution happened, and now this screen revolution is happening. So the modality of communication is changing. Look, we are all talking to each other almost face to face, interacting. It's just the medium that has changed, communication has not. Now, like everything else, there is a side effect. There is a need to be more mindful. There is a need to be more disciplined. And there is a need to be more structured in how we are consuming anything, including technology. So that I think is still there. So balancing this is in our own hands, and we have to be mature enough in doing that. AI will increase the capability to do multitasking. Now, this is very interesting. Human beings are the only stupid people or stupid beings in the world that do multitasking. Neither the animals multitask nor the machines do it. Because when you have to work, you have to focus on one thing at a time. It's a myth that we can multitask. If I'm talking to you and if I decide to also look at my phone, I will be talking to you for a moment and then be distracted and focused on my phone and then back to you and so on and so forth. It will not be in a continuum. The reason why machines are so flawless and they are so efficient is because they don't multitask. The unfortunate reality is the more machines we have, the more multitasking we will drag us into. So when I'm cooking, for example, now I also play the music. I'm also working on my mobile device. None of these devices is doing that. It's the stupid me who's doing that. So multitasking, again, I think is something will have to be very careful and change that habit around. Don't think that AI will do multitasking. AI will strengthen the trap of multitasking that human beings are fed into, and it's a very bad thing. Neurological studies have proven that multitasking is extremely stressful and it's not a good thing to do. Right? How can you change the career from HR to AI? I'll talk more about it in a moment. And interested in, okay, so we'll talk a bit about it. So with these things in mind, there are two aspects. Where are you in your digital change management, and where are you in your thought process change management? Because when we are changing, we'll have to change as an organization, and we will have to change as individuals also. So when we are looking at changing as an organization, these days, ironically, I would say, it's believed that put technology or digitize something and you will change into a new organization. That's not going to happen. According to Gartner, 73% of the IT projects in organizations fail. They fail miserably because the purpose with which digitization is started is never fulfilled. Simply because different organizations are at different levels of maturity, I would say, to embrace technology. So it's like for anything, as human beings also, we all have different levels of maturity or different levels of readiness to embrace a new thing, right? We could vary in our speed of reading, in our speed of learning, picking up new skills, adapting to change, observing, flexibility, so many things. And exactly the same applies to organizations. Organizations have 5 levels of maturity when it comes to their digital change readiness. And once you are starting to change that, when you are initiating a digital change in your organization, I think it's very important that first you assess at what level of maturity your organization is before dragging it into any kind of change initiative. And because most of us, I assume, are HR professionals, this becomes very, very important. At the first level of change, at the first level of digital change, you need to look at how am I changing the enforcement processes of the organization. You cannot go and automate your applicant tracking system if your fundamental payroll system is broken, right? So you need to look at how do you make sure, first of all, that all your compliance requirements, all your policy adherence is migrated and changed into the state-of-the-art digital environment. Majority of the organization feel that let us not fix what is not broken. So they go and buy a hybrid digital technology without really changing the core of it. So it's like if you have a very old car with a very weak engine, and if you go and put a very sophisticated, accessory on that, that's not going to work. So that is very important. At the next level of change management or digital change management, you need to look at how and where are the low-hanging fruits to increase efficiencies. Because I'll tell you, everybody gets fascinated by these good-looking gadgets and smart technology. Oh, let's start measuring employee engagement of people using their facial recognition, those kind of things. I mean, that sounds cool and futuristic, but you need to understand how ready you are at the organizational level. At the third level, it's about how do you bring empowerment and transparency in the culture. A lot of features and functionality of a lot of technological product is not welcomed in organizations because leaders are not ready to give that kind of empowerment and transparency and openness in their environments. So obviously the change management fails there. So look at, are you ready mentally, values perspective, and culturally to give that kind of empowerment and transparency to the people, and then get the right kind of digital technology. It is only at the fourth level that we start talking about these new age employee experience related digital technologies. Where you could probably do fancy things like walking into a room without needing access card, because that sophisticated security is pretty much there. So you don't want your house to look very beautiful in one part and very ugly in the other part. There has to be consistency of the experience. And sometimes I've seen, most of us would have heard that joke where uh, a person enters heaven, and then after a while another gate opens and he goes inside and it is hell, and then jokingly it is said, oh, you were getting recruited at that time and now you are recruited, right? uh, you cannot have a very hybrid experience, say for example at the recruitment side, and the moment people are inside the systems are broken. So from a digital change management, that is important. At the highest level of digital change management, you are able to bring empathy and compassion into the lives of people using technology. So for example, today there are applications available that can actually detect if I am really working hard and not taking enough breaks, right? So my system can tell me, Shakun, you've been sitting on this chair for the last 5 hours and constantly on Zoom meetings. Why don't you just go and take a walk and come back, take a break? And if I'm still not doing it, it can block my computer to literally force me to go and take a break and come back. So those kind of nudges, those kind of intelligent systems can actually help you create the right kind of environment and the outcome from the digital technologies. Now, before I get into the individual part, I think it was important for me to tell you that when it comes to digital change management, change, selection of technology, and development of various applications or change management programs has to be in line with the maturity level of the organization. I'll pause here for a moment and wait and see if there is any comment or any question before I spend the last 5-7 minutes on managing individual change, and thereafter another 5 minutes or so on taking any live questions. Okay, so if there are no further questions, let us understand what will happen. So there are questions, how can change career from HR to AI? So there are three important things that you can do to really become much more employable and much more relevant going forward. First of all, like we see, AI is going to invade everywhere. There will be lots and lots of roles that will get taken away. If you can develop manual dexterity, something that is, हिंदी में उसको बोलते हैं हाथ का काम, right? So if you look at it today, a 3D printed painting is of no price, but a handmade painting can be of millions. A ready-made suit does not cost much, but a bespoke, tailored suit is much higher in value. So the world is going back in a way where machine made is losing value and handcrafted is gaining importance. So find out what is it that you can do in terms of creating manual dexterity. Now, it does not mean that all of us have to become potters or sculptors or chefs. There are other things that we can do. In the context of HR, for example, manual dexterity could mean perhaps being a great coach, being a mentor, looking at those kind of things that are not easily replicable by the machines. I was reading a very interesting book that I would like to recommend to you all. This is a book by Meredith Bussard. It says Artificial Unintelligence. This book talks about what are the things that artificial intelligence is not likely to take over. So therefore, those are the great opportunities. Social skills. All these bots and AI based applications that we are talking will never be able to create social skills. Now, of course, we do jokingly talk about the fact that there are Alexas and the series of the world, but the fact is they don't have social skills. And social skills are going to be most important, specifically for HR professionals. You can always learn AI, you can always adopt to AI, you can always buy AI applications, but you cannot buy social skills. So work towards developing that. And lastly, I think what is most important is highly cognitive skills. What does it mean? AI is based on cognitive skills, and it works with the paradigm of an algorithm. Whatever is fed into it, whatever is relevant, is the universe of that AI application. But when it comes to humans, our logic and our cognitive abilities are not restricted by any algorithm. So if we can have a higher level of cognition, whereby I am able to add further value to the output that AI has given, that's something will be very, very important to define our next level of success in the career. I don't know, Dr. Nandan Dheer, what social script means here. So if you could clarify that, I'll try and answer that question. Social skills or social script can both apply, and which one will be more effective? So please help me understand what do you mean by social script here, and I'll attend to that. Leaders that are not open to digital will not survive, and depending upon their weight, they might even take down the organization. Before this pandemic, there was still a debate going on, is digital important? Or forget digital, look at flexi working. The world was divided into two parts: people who thought flexi working is cool and should be encouraged, and others who thought, no, flexi working is not good. Suddenly something happened and we all went into a zone where only viable way of working was flexi working. Companies that were ready to embrace or which were already working flexibly had a clear advantage. I worked with some very senior leaders who did not know even how to operate a VPN because they were so used to working in the office. So that's not going to happen. And if you find leaders who are resisting that change, resisting that digitization, you should be very, very careful about it. It's a red flag. The first step of change management would be either change your thought process or change such leaders. So that's an important. So lastly, how do we change ourselves and how do we keep up with the with the with the usual expectations? Okay. So social script is around social expectations, right? Good. So the question Dr. Nandan Dheer has posed is social skill more important or social script is more important? And can both apply, and which one will be more effective? I think it is based on context. What will be most important is what we call as emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is something that will help you understand where to apply a social script and where to apply a social skill, where to stick to the rule and where to break the rule. So it's much beyond a yes or no answers, but it's important. And I think the edge that human beings will have over machine is only by bringing out that judgment, that human judgment, whether we call it social script or social skill or emotional intelligence, that human judgment is something that will give us the edge, not only over machines, but also over other fellow human beings as we are entering into this changed workplace. So there are 4 suggestions that I have that will help you to change both the organization as well as yourself, most importantly yourself. The first one is learning agility. If you are not learning enough very quickly and very rapidly, you have a very high risk of redundancy. I have developed a litmus test to figure out whether you are learning enough or not. The learning day is simple. That litmus test is very simple. Do you know today something about something that you knew nothing about 90 days ago? Let me repeat that. Have you learned something today, or do you know something today that you had no clue of about 90 days ago? That means every 3 months you are learning something new. So if you take a moment right now and think, क्या मेरी लाइफ में कोई ऐसी चीज है जो मैं जानता या जानती हूं जिसके बारे में 90 दिन पहले मुझे कुछ नहीं पता था? Then your pace of learning is good enough. But if you're not able to identify anything that you did not know about 90 days ago, my friend, you are not learning enough. You need to do something about it, right? That's one important piece. The second thing is around career mobility. As I mentioned to you earlier, we have to be very, very comfortable with the fact that our careers will change. I used to be the CEO of a HR consulting firm, and I then decided to move into technology, which had nothing to do with what I was doing. A completely change, and I had to just start from ground zero. When I entered here, this is the 5th year that I am working for Oracle, and over the last 5 years, every year I've done a new role, something that I did not know existed before. And that's the new dimension and new perspective of career mobility, that every, as I mentioned earlier, it was 24/7, which means one career living day in and day out versus 7 into 20. That means you will have an average of 7 careers and 20 jobs by the time you retire. So be mentally prepared already. Values and ethics go a long way in defining, and I would take Dr. Dheer's terminology, the social script that you have. You have to be authentic. Gone are those days when you could put on a facade and have your work personality and your personal personality. You have to be very authentic, and that authenticity can only come when you are really operating from some very foundational and very solid values and ethics. Unethical behavior or and unauthentic behavior will not survive, because you are now not, I was jokingly saying that the door that separated our work life and our home life is disappeared, right? I'm sitting in my home. You can see where I live, what I do, who I am, very, very transparently. And now I cannot show off. I cannot have a different personality. So third important piece around changing into the most relevant person would be around having authenticity. And lastly, you got to communicate. And this was one of the questions also that came in earlier about how do you communicate? You have to figure out a way, right? We are communicating, right? We are communicating. When you are managing change in the organization, you got to communicate with your people. Majority of the organizations have found newer and interesting ways to keep in touch and keep communicating. So you learn something, you have flexibility of your careers, you have great set of values, and then relentlessly communicate about it. And that's a 4-point, I would say, plan to change and manage digital change going forward. Right? So I'll pause here, and Peter, Dr. Ankita, or anybody else has any questions or comments to make, very happy to take it at this point in time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Akun. So we have one question out here. When it comes to cultural change, we have AI that we talk about, in terms of how we need to get adapted towards it. When it comes towards culture, what is the culture that is needed for this entire digital transformation that we are talking of?
I think there are only two, to my mind, there are only two fundamental tenets that are required: culture of agility and culture of learning. If any organization is continuously learning and is flexible enough, then they have a very high chance of surviving and succeeding going forward. But if these two tenets are missing and there is anything else, it may not be there, because the fundamental ingredient is missing. So every organization has its unique culture and it works. Some are hierarchical, some are flat, some are, empowering, some are power centric, all that is fine. But in the current context and in the future, two ingredients of, or two must-have ingredients are learning agility, learning agility and agility and learning, right? These are the two things. Continuous learning and agility, sorry.
Agility.
Continuous learning and agility.
Rightly said, rightly said. So we have one question from Preeti, who like she has mentioned, she is interested to learn, but could not understand which learning will help in the future.
Here is what I will tell you. Go on YouTube and watch Steve Jobs talking about this in his famous speech in Stanford University. He says that the dots will always connect in the past. So don't worry about what should I learn. Just learn something or anything that draws your interest or attention. They say that books draw you. I did not keep this book thinking that I will pull it out and show you, right? It just showed up at the right moment. So when you are learning something, don't worry about why should I learn it. You should learn it because you're finding it interesting and it is available for you to learn. Then you will realize that it will just show up when it is required, right? So don't learn. We never learn, in school we learned so many subjects. If you ask me what was the purpose, no, there was no purpose. But does it matter? Yes, of course. There is one time when we realized that, oh yeah, that geography principle that I learned is now applicable today. So learn whatever interests you, learn something that you find fascinating. Don't try and find the purpose and then learn. Any learning that is driven by purpose miserably fails.
Absolutely, sir. Rightly said. Great. So we have one question here from Dr. Ankita. No, I think so. Yes, it's from Radha. Due to uncertainty in the market about jobs, career mobility can be difficult at this point of time. Everyone is just busy in saving their own jobs right now. So it's all about the job market that we talk about, fear of losing jobs, AI taking over it. So what is it how do we overcome this uncertainty?
So it's very simple. Jobs are dying, don't try and save them. You need money, try and create a source of income for you. Source of income comes from a skill that you have and a way to monetize that. So therefore I say that you have to be open. You have to be open to multiple sources of income. Just because, say, for example, you studied law and you have to be a lawyer to make money is not going to help you. So today you need to understand what is that skill, what is the value that I have, and how can I monetize it? That's it. A lot of energy is going into saving jobs. And let me tell you very, very honestly, most of us are HR professionals here. When people lose jobs, they don't lose jobs because they deserve their jobs to be lost. They just lose jobs because they're lost, right? So don't try and save something which is inevitable to be lost. Try and see how can I build capability in me to be able to create that income. CHROs today are getting part-time gig opportunities. There are CEOs who are CEOs of multiple organizations. So my thing would be, don't worry about job. If it has to, it's like my hair getting lost, right? So I try to save my hair. It won't. Now I focus on, okay, without the hair, how can I look better, right? So that's what you got to do.
Rightly said, the gig world that we are into. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful insights on the entire change management. I'm sure all our participants will definitely benefit out of this. It has been a pleasure being with you today. Thank you so much for taking significant amount of questions of our participants. Thank you so much, sir.
It's my pleasure and privilege. If you want, you can read more about my work on my website, shakunkhanna.com, or as you rightly said in the beginning, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you all for your time and patiently listening to me. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we conclude with our today's session, we would also want to thank all our association members, that is Asia, NASCOM COE, and LinkedIn Local, for supporting these HRAI events. To know more about these associations, request you to kindly visit the link provided in the chat window. Thank you once again, dear speaker, and our participants for joining us today. Do join us for our next masterclass tomorrow on delegation and empowerment. A Leader Can't Walk Alone by Mr. Jagmohan Banwal on the 26th of August 2020. Request you to kindly register on this link mentioned in the chat window. See you soon. Stay safe, take care, and bye for now.
Thank you so much, Shakun. It was a wonderful experience, amazingly productive session. And yeah, as I mentioned in a chat window, those 4 pointers and something that you talked about multitasking. I'll definitely remember these two and for sure implement. Thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure, ma'am. It's been great being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Sham. So we can now conclude with our webinar.
Okay.
Thank you.